let's take one of the example that comes to the top of the mind is the email business where we're the GOP emailing business we have. For those who don't know, we have a publication marketing business where we send content to the people in the GOP party, and then we also monetize it via ads and things like that. Um, and the main thing there is to put in an email subject. The most important thing there is our email subject lines. That's what, without that, without click through rates, that those are the, lead generation and getting people to actually open the emails. The opening of the emails is where the monetization happens. That's the most important thing. So how do you do it? Well, you got to have emotional headlines. Like they got to have something that makes people react. And what I've noticed as like if you let's say there's a meal that some kind of specific meal that your mother makes, Dimitri, some specific like Russian dish that your mom has made, I don't know, thousands of times, tens of thousands of times at this point in her life. When she's making it, she can like test it, or she could like taste it, understand, oh, I need to do a little bit of this, a little bit of that. She can give you the exact ingredients, but you can't make it like she can. She'll take it and she'll be tested, and she just knows. It's become intuitive because she's had so many reps, right? That's what happened with us. So that's what happens to me with stories and email headlines. You write so much that when you take it, like after, I'll read it and I'll know, did that make me feel something or not? Like that, did that potentially, ooh, like that, it's almost like tasting the food and be like, I need a little bit more salt or whatever. Like you could read the email subject line, like, this needs a little more flavor. Let me change this word. Oh, now that's it. That's it right there. It becomes intuitive because we've done the reps to understand to develop that intuition. So to answer your question, yeah, um, I taste it, for lack of better words. I'm almost like tasting the headline or the story when I write it to see if it evokes something in me, and that's taken time to develop that. But anybody can do it. My team of copywriters are there now because they've written so many headlines.
Yeah, that's cool because in if you don't approach it from an emotional perspective, it's just a statistical playing the numbers game. You can put in 100 variations, ask ChatGPT to put them, and then take the best performing one. There's no emotion in that, but I don't know if that's going to outperform something like what you're doing because you're actually using your own instinct and your own reaction, which is hard to do. I bet that's hard to do, is like actually test yourself. How am I reacting to this without this being a real um, like natural experience? It's something that you're testing. So I bet that's something that you learned over time to really understand and read your own reaction to it.
Yes, it's going back to what we were saying earlier at the beginning of the segment, how I'm practicing detaching emotions. Part of that is watching the emotions develop in you, and so when it comes to the articles or the headlines, it's like, you read them and then you start scanning your body for, did something happen when I read that line, or just as important, did something not happen? If I read this entire thing and nothing happened, maybe I need to kind of gauge what I'm writing here.
This might be even a bigger topic of because we've talked about how to disconnect from work when we're trying to do personal stuff. And I think part of the difficulty in disconnecting lies in this emotional state as well. There's some part to this, I think, where I'm talking about your client now leaving in that case, and like it's hard to disconnect from that. It's not like you could just put your business hat on. It's like, okay, now forget about that. That's already in the past, and I'm just going to continue working, and we can use those as testimonials, get some new clients. Maybe we'll get even better clients. Those opens up new, like the business hat, and then you have, of course, your human hat, and then with doing personal stuff, you want to put on your personal hat and put away the business hat, and it's hard to do all these things. So I think um, the kind of the parent issue to this is how do you focus on the thing you want to focus on instead of what your brain is making you focus on.
That's a massive question, and there are literally people who spend their entire lives mastering just that.
Yeah, that's like some Zen Buddhism
Yes.
stuff that we'll
Yep.
have to have somebody on to explain to us in detail.
Yes, sir.
Okay, well, thank you for sharing the from the arena and hearing real life stories like that that are actually happening, and real wins in this case, real losses and pain felt. And Chris, I definitely feel for you. I'm sure the listeners feel for you as well, and we're hoping that you'll be able to and maybe one day even work it out with that specific client, because again, 14-year relationship isn't chump change. uh,
Yep.
and and hopefully you're able to replace and multiply that lost income.
Thank you, brother.
Okay, let's move on to the lawsuit that we want to talk about, which is a big thing. Now, this is more of a international, global, on center stage in the world, a lawsuit that's happening to the biggest company in the entire known universe, called Apple Inc. Chris, what's going on with them?
Apple's getting sued for allegedly having a monopoly on smartphones. I'll read a small paragraph here because I don't want to just talk off the top of my head because I don't know all the exact reasons. But a quick little summary is that the DOJ alleges Apple has met competitive threats by imposing a series of shape-shifting rules and restrictions in its App Store guidelines and developer agreements that would allow Apple to extract higher fees, thwart innovation, offer a less secure or degraded user experience, and throttle competitive alternatives. So, what I took from that, and if you're an Apple user, you may understand too that Apple basically says, look, we have our rules and we'll change them whenever we want, make them fit whatever we want. And if you're using some shit on this phone that we don't want you to, we're going to make it either not allow you to use it or make it a shitty user experience. Hence, communicating with somebody who has an Android phone, in my experience, sending videos or getting videos from somebody who has an Android phone that's all fucked up and stuff and all small. So things like that, they are getting sued for.
Dude, that specific thing to me is hilarious that they do that. The whole the green text bubble, and like, who's this loser that I'm texting? That's what you feel. By the way, this is coming from a lifelong Android user who just switched recently, and I'm snobby now. I'm snobby to the green text, and it's genius marketing. And I'm surprised Google hasn't just done the same thing back to Apple. Like, you would think, like, Apple's messing with you. Why not mess with Apple back? You're a big company too. Like, you're not, you may not be number one in terms of market cap. Let's see, Google. My guess is they're number three in the world. Like, that's pretty dang big, and maybe it might be number two.
Pretty impressive.
But okay, so they're getting sued by the Department of Justice for taking actions to reduce competition in the environment. So, how does that make you feel?
You know, I think that Apple needed something. They needed a kick in the balls, uh, as we all do. When you get too cocky, it's good to be brought down. That happens to me often. Um, and I think Apple. Let's look back as marketers here. For those in the game, you remember back in, was it 2021 when they did the iOS 14 update? Was that 21 or something, or
Maybe 2020.
2020 or 2020? Well, back then, iOS did the iOS 14 update. For those who aren't familiar, it's when you install an app and then the app itself will say, hey, it'll give you some message that basically says, hey, do you want this app to spy on you or not? And of course, you're going to say, no, don't spy on me. Well, what happened? Let's look at Facebook. Facebook has so much data on people, phenomenal ad exchange. Well, when Apple did that, they kicked Facebook in the balls. Facebook lost a ton of money that year due to that iOS update. and Apple starts doing things with that. They start getting funny with email. They automatically open all the emails. If they just start, they started messing with their shit, making it harder if you're an outsider. My theory behind it is that Apple was moving towards their own ad exchange and this, that, and the other. But my point to all this is that Apple has a lot of power. They make up their own rules, and that can be frustrating quite often. And for me, when I read this, it's not quite um, in the marketing arena. It can be for sure. It can be for sure, but it's not like they're being sued because of their marketing practices. But it's uh, it's always interesting to see the bully get bullied.
Yeah, because we do have, yeah, a handful of bullies, and Apple is one of them. I think the Department of Justice can be classified as another. Now, I do stand corrected. Apple has lost its number one spot to Microsoft recently, as Microsoft has been an absolute tear in terms of market cap. And Google comes in at a lowly number five behind Nvidia and Saudi Aramco, which is a oil company, which is back up now in Saudi Arabia. So Microsoft, Apple, Google, Nvidia, Amazon, Facebook, these are all in the top 10, and they're all bullies, and they all compete with each other. They also need each other. Like you mentioned, Facebook needed Apple to keep letting them do their thing. And maybe it is a competitive thing where Apple will come out with its own ad exchange. Because, yeah, look, check this out. Okay. And you mentioned Apple lost a lot of money because of this. So I mean, Facebook lost money because of the iOS 14 update, and really it was that marketers could no longer effectively show ads to quite the same degree that they used to. So the update was in 2020. People kept spending in 2021. It was a growth period, but in 2022, it's hard to say what exactly is correlated, but their net profit, their net income fell by nearly 50% that year.
Damn.
And yeah, and I think it has a lot to do with that iOS 14 update, because in our world, everyone was complaining about it. They were freaking out and they needed to diversify. How do I get on Google Ads now? How do I get other traffic from somewhere else? What do we do? What do we do? And eventually it was corrected. But for a year or a year and a half, it's kind of a really big problem.